if you're willing to see. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. If you've ever felt a woman care about you but act like she doesn't, stay with me because what you're about to hear might shake you. Before we go deeper, take 1 second to like this video and subscribe, because what I'm sharing here is the kind of emotional truth most men never get access to. And while you're watching, I want you to think about someone specific, a woman who confused you, a woman whose actions never fully matched the feeling in her eyes. Have you ever walked away from a woman thinking, if she really cared, she would have shown it, only to later realize maybe you misunderstood her completely? Comment hidden feelings below if you've ever experienced that. I'm Lauren, and I want to tell you something most women will never explain directly. There are moments when a woman's heart is screaming for someone while her behavior is doing everything possible to stay composed. And unless you understand female psychology deeply, you will misread her silence as indifference, her distance as rejection, and her guardedness as lack of interest. But here's the truth. When feelings become emotionally dangerous for a woman, love rarely looks soft and obvious. Sometimes it becomes quiet, controlled, contradictory, hidden inside teasing, distance, emotional testing, and tiny acts of care that are easy to overlook if you're only searching for obvious affection. And if you've ever been confused by a woman who stayed emotionally close while pretending not to care, then what you're about to hear may completely change how you see women forever. Because attraction is not always loud. Sometimes the deepest feelings are the ones fighting hardest not to be exposed. A lot of men grow up believing attraction should be simple. If she likes you, she'll tell you. If she cares, she'll chase. If she's emotionally invested, it'll be obvious. But human psychology, especially emotional psychology, rarely works that way, particularly for women who have been hurt before, women who learned that vulnerability can be dangerous, women who loved deeply once and paid for it emotionally. Those women don't always express love openly. They manage it, control it, hide it behind behavior that feels safer. And this is where so many men get it wrong. They judge a woman's emotions only by what's visible on the surface, but emotional attachment often leaks out indirectly. In psychology, we call this emotional displacement. Feelings that are too intense to express directly find sideways exits. That's why a woman who deeply likes you might suddenly become colder after intimacy. Why she remembers tiny details but pretends not to care. Why she teases you instead of complimenting you. Why she disappears briefly after moments of closeness. It's not because she feels nothing. It's because she feels too much. And once you understand this, you start seeing things most men completely miss. For example, let's talk about memory. One of the clearest signs a woman is emotionally attached to you is not what she says. It's what she remembers. You casually mention a childhood story one time. Maybe you tell her about a place your father used to take you, or a dream you abandoned years ago. You forget the conversation entirely. Then, 3 weeks later, she suddenly says something like, "Didn't you once say you loved that place when you were younger?" And for a second, you freeze, because you barely remember telling her, but she does. Now pay attention carefully here, because this matters. Women emotionally prioritize differently than men. When a woman becomes emotionally invested, her brain begins attaching significance to details connected to you. Research in emotional cognition consistently shows that emotional relevance sharpens memory retention. In simple terms, when you matter emotionally, your words stop being random information to her. They become emotionally stored experiences. But here's where it gets subtle. A woman hiding feelings rarely emphasizes the fact that she remembers. She'll say it casually, lightly, almost dismissively, because if she lets you fully realize how closely she listens to you, she risks revealing how important you've become emotionally, and that exposure terrifies her. I once worked with a woman in therapy who told me something fascinating. She said, I knew I was falling for him when I started remembering things he didn't even remember saying. Think about how revealing that is psychologically. Her attention had shifted from casual observation into emotional tracking. That's not friendship. That's attachment. And men miss this all the time because they're waiting for dramatic declarations instead of studying quiet consistency. A woman who secretly cares watches your emotional state carefully. She notices changes in your energy before you explain them. She remembers when you're stressed. She asks about something important to you weeks later. And often, she does all of this while acting emotionally neutral on the surface. That contradiction confuses men, but emotionally, it makes perfect sense. Because remembering someone deeply is intimate, and intimacy feels risky when your heart is involved. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. One of the strongest signs a woman is emotionally affected by you is what happens immediately after moments of connection. This is where most men completely misunderstand female behavior. You have an incredible conversation. The chemistry feels effortless. She laughs genuinely. Eye contact lingers. The emotional energy becomes warm, soft, vulnerable, and then suddenly, she pulls back, replies slower, acts slightly colder, becomes harder to read, and you think, I must have imagined the connection. No, not necessarily. Very often, the exact opposite is happening. You need to understand something critical about emotional vulnerability in women. For many women, emotional closeness creates internal panic when feelings are growing too quickly, because now the stakes feel real. Now she has something to lose. Now you matter. And once someone matters emotionally, fear enters the picture. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of being more invested than the other person, fear of losing emotional control. So what does she do? She regulates herself through distance, not permanent distance, temporary emotional recalibration. This is what psychologists often describe as a push-pull attachment response. Part of her wants closeness desperately, another part wants emotional safety. So after intense connection, she instinctively creates space to calm the emotional intensity inside herself. And if you don't understand this dynamic, you misread her completely. Because disinterest doesn't usually appear strongest immediately after emotional intimacy. That timing matters. A woman who feels nothing drifts away consistently. A woman who feels too much often pulls back, then returns. Have you ever experienced that with someone? She got close, then suddenly distant, then close again? If you have, type push-pull in the comments. I read your comments all the time, and I want to know how many of you have lived through this confusion. Here's the deeper truth most men never hear. Sometimes the distance is not rejection. Sometimes it's emotional overwhelm. I remember a man once describing a woman he couldn't understand. He said, "Every time we got emotionally close, she disappeared for a few days. Then she'd come back acting normal again." And what he interpreted as inconsistency was actually emotional self-protection. She wasn't running from him. She was running from how vulnerable she felt around him. That distinction changes everything. Now, let's talk about another behavior men constantly misunderstand. Teasing. Not generic teasing, personal teasing. The kind where she notices your quirks, habits, insecurities, routines, or tiny personality traits and turns them into playful jokes. Most men think this is meaningless banter. It's usually not. Emotionally intelligent women often use teasing as a safer substitute for direct affection. Why? Because teasing creates connection without requiring emotional exposure. A compliment feels vulnerable. Softness feels revealing. Direct admiration can feel terrifying if she's trying to maintain emotional control. But teasing lets her focus attention on you while hiding behind humor. And psychologically, that matters. Because the things she teases you about are usually the things she notices most intensely. Your expressions, your routines, the phrases you repeat, your nervous habits, the way you react emotionally. She studies you more than she admits. then disguises that attention as humor. And the deeper her feelings become, the more personal the teasing usually gets. But here's the key. Watch her eyes when she teases you. This is where hidden emotion leaks out unconsciously. Does her gaze soften afterward? Does she glance at your reaction carefully? Does her smile linger slightly too long? That's emotional investment revealing itself beneath the joke. A woman who feels nothing doesn't emotionally study your reactions. A woman who secretly cares absolutely does, because your response matters to her emotionally, and often she doesn't even realize how transparent she becomes in those moments. Now there's another powerful psychological sign most men never notice: mirroring. This one is subtle, but once you see it, you can never unsee it. When a woman becomes emotionally drawn to you, she unconsciously begins synchronizing with your emotional rhythm. She mirrors your energy, your speech patterns, your pacing, your humor, even your body language sometimes. And no, this isn't manipulation. It's emotional alignment. Human beings naturally mirror people they feel emotionally connected to. It's rooted in subconscious rapport building and attachment behavior. But when feelings are hidden, mirroring becomes quieter and harder to spot. Maybe she starts using phrases you use. Maybe her texting style slowly begins resembling yours. Maybe she starts enjoying music, shows, or ideas you casually introduced her to. Maybe her mood shifts subtly depending on yours. And the fascinating part? She often doesn't consciously realize she's doing it. Her nervous system is simply adapting toward emotional closeness. This is why emotionally invested women often feel deeply in sync with the men they secretly care about. Their attention locks onto emotional compatibility. And again, men misread this constantly. They assume she's just friendly, easygoing, naturally agreeable. But consistency reveals the truth. When the same woman repeatedly aligns herself emotionally with your energy across different situations, something deeper is happening psychologically. Because emotionally detached people don't subconsciously synchronize with your emotional frequency. Emotionally attached people do. And once you begin noticing these patterns together, the memory, the teasing, the push-pull distance, the mirroring, you start realizing something profound. Her heart may already be far closer to you than her words allow. But we haven't even reached the most revealing behavior yet, because the next sign is the one that exposes hidden feelings more clearly than almost anything else, and most men completely mishandle it when it happens. The next sign is subtle, emotionally layered, and incredibly misunderstood. She tests you, not in the dramatic way social media talks about, not mind games, not manipulation. I'm talking about quiet emotional experiments. Small moments where she's trying to answer one question internally. Are you emotionally safe for me? This is one of the biggest differences between male and female attraction psychology. Men often move toward attraction directly. Women frequently move toward attraction cautiously, especially when the emotional stakes feel high. So instead of openly confessing feelings, many women begin observing your emotional behavior through tiny situations that seem insignificant on the surface. Maybe she shares a vulnerable story and watches how carefully you respond. Maybe she lightly disagrees with you just to see how emotionally reactive you become. Maybe she creates a small boundary and observes whether you respect it. Maybe she talks about another man casually just to measure whether you become possessive, calm, secure, dismissive, or emotionally immature. To most men, these moments seem random. But psychologically, they are emotional data collection. Because attraction alone is not enough for most women to feel emotionally safe, she also needs emotional trust. And trust is built through observation. This is why emotionally intelligent women often study your consistency before fully opening their hearts. Not because they're calculating, because vulnerability is expensive emotionally, particularly for women who have been disappointed before. I once spoke with a woman who admitted something brutally honest. She said, "I liked him long before I let him know. I was watching how he handled frustration, stress, boundaries, and disappointment first." That sentence explains female emotional psychology perfectly. Women often fall emotionally before they reveal it verbally, but they delay expression until safety catches up to emotion. And this is where men sabotage themselves constantly. They become impatient. They misinterpret caution as rejection. They react emotionally to small tests instead of understanding what's really happening underneath. But when you remain calm, emotionally grounded, respectful, and emotionally intelligent through those moments, something fascinating happens. She softens. Her guard lowers incrementally. You begin seeing warmth she doesn't show everyone else. And this transition is incredibly revealing. Because emotionally guarded, women do not soften accidentally. They soften when trust begins replacing fear. Now here's another sign that hidden feelings are growing stronger. She acts differently with you in private than she does in public. This one matters more than men realize. In public, she may appear composed, controlled, almost emotionally neutral, especially around friends, co-workers, or family. But when you're alone together, something changes. Her voice softens, her attention deepens, her eye contact lingers. She becomes warmer, more emotionally present, more open. These are what psychologists call behavioral contrasts, and they reveal internal emotional conflict. Because publicly displaying affection can feel emotionally exposing for a woman trying to hide her feelings. So she maintains composure around others. But in private, her subconscious relaxes, and tiny cracks begin appearing in the emotional wall she's been trying to maintain. This is why private moments matter so much. Not the big, dramatic moments. The small ones. The way she looks at you when nobody else is around. The softness in her voice. The sudden emotional calmness. The way she listens more attentively. The way silence between you starts feeling emotionally intimate instead of awkward. Those moments reveal more truth than words ever could. And men often overlook them because they're searching for certainty instead of emotional patterns. But love rarely announces itself clearly in the beginning. It leaks, quietly, through behavior, through energy, through emotional shifts. Now let me tell you something deeply important. A woman who secretly cares about you will often make quiet sacrifices you barely notice. And honestly, this might be one of the purest signs of hidden affection. Because sacrifice is effort, and effort reveals priority. Maybe she rearranges her schedule to see you. Maybe she stays awake longer to talk to you even when she's exhausted. Maybe she remembers tiny preferences you mentioned casually. Maybe she checks on you emotionally during stressful moments. Maybe she goes slightly out of her way to make your life easier without drawing attention to it. And the important part is this. She downplays all of it. She acts like it's no big deal, because openly revealing effort feels emotionally vulnerable. But hidden affection almost always appears through consistency of care. A woman who doesn't care emotionally rarely invests sustained energy into your comfort, peace, or emotional well-being. But a woman quietly falling for you? She will. And often she'll do it invisibly. This reminds me of something a client once realized too late. He said, "I didn't notice how much she cared until she stopped doing the little things." And isn't that how human beings often learn? We overlook quiet love because we expect loud love. But emotionally mature affection is often subtle, steady, intentional, not performative. And if you're paying attention carefully, you'll notice something fascinating about women hiding feelings. Their words often stay controlled, but their behavior becomes emotionally generous. Now, there's one final behavior I need you to understand, because it changes everything once you recognize it. Jealousy. Not dramatic jealousy. Hidden jealousy. The kind she tries desperately not to reveal. A woman hiding strong feelings usually wants emotional control. So when another woman enters your attention, she often tries to remain calm externally. But emotionally, you'll notice micro-reactions, a slight shift in mood, subtle curiosity, a change in tone, more questions than usual, teasing that suddenly feels sharper, emotional withdrawal, or strange silence. Why? Because jealousy exposes emotional investment. And if she's been trying to hide her feelings, jealousy threatens the entire emotional mask. Now, let me be clear. Healthy attraction and unhealthy possessiveness are not the same thing. Emotionally mature women don't become controlling simply because they care, but emotionally invested women often react internally when your attention shifts elsewhere, even if they try to hide it, because attachment creates emotional sensitivity, and emotionally sensitive people notice threats to connection quickly. The important thing is not whether she becomes dramatically jealous. It's whether her emotional behavior subtly changes when another woman gains your attention. That's usually where the truth slips out. And when you combine all these signs together, something powerful becomes visible. The remembering, the mirroring, the teasing, the distance after closeness, the emotional testing, the private warmth, the quiet sacrifices, the hidden jealousy. Suddenly, the confusion starts making sense. She wasn't emotionally indifferent. She was emotionally afraid, and fear changes the way affection appears. This is something I really need men to understand deeply. A woman can crave closeness while simultaneously fearing vulnerability. Those two emotions coexist constantly in human psychology, especially in people who love deeply. And honestly, some of the strongest feelings a woman will ever have are the ones she fights hardest to conceal. Because once emotions become real, the possibility of pain becomes real too. That's why emotionally intelligent men learn to observe behavior patterns instead of obsessing over dramatic declarations. They notice consistency, energy, effort, emotional presence, because hidden love leaves traces everywhere once you know how to see them. And here's the part I want you to remember long after this video ends. Not every emotionally guarded woman is playing games. Sometimes she's protecting parts of herself that were once broken. Sometimes her distance is caution, not rejection. Sometimes her silence contains emotion she doesn't yet know how to express safely. And sometimes the woman who appears hardest to read is actually feeling the most. If this video opened your eyes even a little, make sure you subscribe to Lauren Mind Game, because this channel is about understanding the emotional realities nobody teaches openly. We talk about attraction, psychology, emotional intelligence, relationships, female behavior, masculine energy, and the hidden dynamics that quietly shape human connection. And before you leave, I want you to think about this carefully. Who in your life suddenly makes more sense after hearing this? Who showed you hidden affection you completely misunderstood at the time? Maybe it was a woman who remembered everything about you. Maybe it was someone who pulled away after intimacy. Maybe it was someone who teased you endlessly while secretly caring far more than you realized. Or maybe there's someone in your life doing these things right now. If there is, don't rush to force clarity. Pay attention instead. Watch patterns. Watch consistency. Watch effort. Because love often whispers before it speaks. And the people who understand emotional whispers are the ones who stop losing real connections. They were never meant to misunderstand. Sometimes the deepest feelings are hidden behind the quietest behavior. And once you learn to recognize that truth, you stop asking, "Does she care?" You start asking a far more intelligent question. How is her heart trying to reveal itself without feeling exposed? That question changes everything. And if you've made it this far, comment, "I see it now," below. I genuinely want to know who stayed until the end. I'll see you in the next video.